think if I could invite my panellists to join me here whenever they're ready, I'll just, while they're doing so, I will quickly give my own introduction. I'm Sam. It's nice to be with you all today. I am the editor of Public Technology, and we're really happy that we were able to be the media partner for this event. It's been a really great day. I hope you've got as much out of it as I have, and thanks so much for being here right to the, well, let's not call it the bitter end, shall we? Let's say the joyful end of the day. I think this is a really great panel to end on because it's focused on impact, and I think that's ultimately what everything's all about. I am lucky enough in my job to talk to a lot of public servants who work in digital, data and tech. I think probably the things that frustrate them and annoy them about their jobs probably all differ, but the thing that I could say unites pretty much everyone I speak to is an enthusiasm for impact, for doing good, ultimately on the front line, for having a positive benefit for citizens and for the colleagues across the public sector who deliver services to them. So we're going to discuss today, over the next hour or so, how best we can make that happen with data and tech, some of the challenges inherent in doing so and how we meet those. So I'm going to come to my panellists one by one and get a quick intro from each of you to who you are, your organisation, and maybe a little kind of insight into what impact looks like, what delivering impact looks like in the context of your job. So firstly, on my immediate right here, we have Jason Kitcat, Director of Digital Data and Technology at the Department for Business and Trade. Jason, fantastic to have you with us. Thanks so much for being here. Could we get a quick intro into who you are and what you're all about?
Well, you said who I am. So I've saved myself on that. So Department for Business and Trade is a new department created in February of this year. And our purpose is to encourage growth, to attract investment into the UK and help UK businesses to grow. And for us, impact really is helping the teams that we have around the world. We're the second largest employer of civil servants overseas after the Foreign Office, and to help our teams spread across the regions and nations of the UK to be more impactful. Just to take one tiny example, we use a machine learning algorithm to learn what businesses look like that will be successful when they start exporting. And we use that to find businesses who haven't started exporting, and we send a trade advisor to them to get that first win, that first export deal that will hopefully set them on the path to future success, because we know that businesses that sell overseas have far more impact on the economy and employ more people in better paid jobs, which is better overall for the UK prosperity. So that's sort of a small bit of what we do and how we try and make a difference.
Great, thank you, Jason. And next to Jason, we have Giles Herdale, who I was speaking to just a moment ago, has worn several different hats, I think, in the course of his career, now an independent advisor on data ethics in policing. Giles, thank you so much for being with us here today. Could we get a quick intro from you?
No, thanks very much for having me. And just to explain, yes, I'm an independent, so I'm not here, I'm not the voice of the police, but I do work with the National Police Chiefs Council, which is the umbrella body for police forces in England and Wales. And I'm currently working on the Violence Against Women and Girls Task Force. And anybody who's been remotely interested or paying attention around any stories to do with policing over the last couple of years will be aware of the trust and confidence deficit that exists around the police response in general, but the police response to tackling violence against women and girls in particular. And we could spend the whole panel talking about some of the reasons for that, but I wanted to talk specifically around some of the potential opportunities there are to perhaps use technology better and more consistently across the country to help rebuild some of that trust and confidence and show there's an improved response from police forces to this issue, because it's a massive challenge. It's just to give you a few stats. Domestic abuse alone is now one of the single largest crime types that's reported to the police. Over 845,000 reports to the police annually. So that's an enormous that's an enormous volume of material, and we know that there are huge barriers to reporting. On average, somebody who is the subject of domestic abuse will undergo up to 30 experiences before they contact the police. So that we know there's a massive reporting challenge. So one of the things we're looking at is how can we make reporting more simpler for victims and survivors of violence against women and girls offences. How can we make them at the centre of the process rather than it being a police or criminal justice system centric view? How can we do it at a pace and in a way that gives them as much control as possible over what they say, when they say it, what information they share, and how that information is then taken forward into a potential prosecution. So there's lots of issues there, but there's plenty of potential, I think, for technology to support that, both technology that's deployed by policing directly, but also technology that can be offered through third parties, whether that's advocacy organisations, survivors and support networks, or indeed the private sector that can help support that. So I hope we can talk about some of those things.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Giles, and really impactful work clearly already going on there, and look forward to hearing more about that. Next to Giles, we have Rahana Ramesh, the Head of Digital Transformation at Brent Council in London. Rahana, thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you. Could we get a quick intro to what you do at Brent?
Thank you, Sam. Good afternoon, everyone. As Sam said, Rahana Ramesh, I'm the Head of Digital Transformation in Brent. Brent's vision is that we leverage the use of technology, data, and innovation to improve the lives of Brent residents so that they have better life opportunities and chances. What does that mean in real terms for us is that we are using technology to not just solve problems, which is now and then, which could be anything related to housing or social care, but also that we are focusing on emerging challenges, be it around healthcare or the environmental sustainability. One of our key aims is to deliver products or to deliver services and design them in such a way that we're putting residents at the heart of it. So it's very much being very citizen-centric. And I think the last point for us, what we're trying to do in Brent is create an ecosystem working with like-minded partners, be it the police, be it the DWP, the NHS, or even voluntary organizations like Crisis or Age UK, to create that ecosystem where it's everybody's responsibility to support a resident in Brent. It's not just the local authority's responsibility, including the residents themselves. And we're hoping that by doing that, there'll be better inclusion and there's a bit of more forward thinking. I won't talk about AI today. I think it's been done to death. So that's what we're trying to do in Brent.
Thank you so much, Rahana. And finally, Jill Stewart, Chief Digital Officer at the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities. Great to have you here, Jill. Thank you for being here. Could we get a quick introduction from you?
Hi. Well, thank you for having me. I suppose is the starting point. So, as said, I am Jill Stewart. I am the Chief Digital Officer at the Department of Levelling Up Housing and Communities, and I think the clue is in the title. So we're very, very embedded into the levelling up agenda, into stewardship, into enabling kind of different parts of the housing and those type of aspects. My role specifically on the digital side is kind of twofold. One, it's about how do we move things forward within the department, and by that the breadth of digital services, for instance, that we provide are everything from the elections, so the voter card ID, that sits within my department's remit, around the Homes for Ukraine, so obviously we spun that up, all the way through to like energy performance certificates, so it's very, very broad internal within the department. But then there's the second aspect of it, which is the external focus and out into the local authorities and councils, which is where the local digital aspects come in. And that's very much about implanting digital skills and enabling digital solutions in the public kind of domain. So we're trying to open things out and make things as easy and accessible as possible. So it's about how do you embed that capability and that ability to self-sustain into the local sector.
Great, thank you. Jill, I'll stay with you, if I may, for our first question. You talked about technology as an enabler there. What do you see as the role of tech as an enabler for a new kind of generation of digital services that are, as we're here to talk about, outcome focused, I guess, rather than just, digitization focused?
I think the key thing in that statement is around changing the focus onto outcomes. So that's probably the number one trend that we're kind of seeing, which is instead of putting in technology for the sake of technology, instead it's about what's the actual outcome that you're trying to drive. And one of the fundamental things that I think I've seen is instead, previously, technology was always being used as you put it in and you had to use it, and it was about trying to make a bad process run slightly faster. Yeah. And now what's happening is we're taking a step back from that, and you're seeing that with the level of kind of digital disruption and things like that that's happening, with elsewhere in the industry. They're kind of saying, do we need to do things in that way? Or actually, should we just focus on what's the outcome that we're trying to achieve? And then what's the fastest and the most efficient way of getting to that outcome? And that's the kind of thing that I think that we're trying to also bring in almost perhaps not as wide-ranging as some of those very, very kind of like cutting-edge tech companies, but we're trying to do it from what are the things that we can do, that we can develop and deploy out in order to kind of like enable some of the outcomes that kind of will help move the sector forward. So you're seeing things. So for us, we're doing things like low scale, so with the big threat around cyber and the nervousness and the inability to kind of, where do we start? So we're rolling out, for instance, our cyber assessment framework. So that's trying to get to that outcome of kind of local authorities, they want to feel secure. So how can we deploy what's a minimum standard product, and how can we make that easier? And then also about the enabling kind of like organisations to help themselves. So how do we encourage collaboration? How do we encourage shared risk? All of those type of aspects. So again, we're running things like the Local Digital Fund, which is about providing money for digital solutions that then people can move forward with themselves. So do the pitch, kind of like this is the outcome that we're searching for, and then using that as a springboard to collaborate across the sector. And then we're really kind of like digging into it even deeper with our future councils kind of concept, which is, I suppose, really playing to kind of like the question, the kind of the going all the way back to first principles and saying, okay, what's the fundamental things that now need to change in order to build the councils of the future? And what are those things that we can help from the centre so that we can kind of like take some of the risk away, versus what are the things that we can maybe help kind of like local authorities to work with each other to collaborate on, and then what are the things that maybe are so unique to those local authorities. So that's kind of like what we're focusing on.
Rahana, I'd be curious, I kind of saw you seemingly agreeing with Jill's point at the beginning about the starting point being the outcome, I guess, rather than we've got this bad process, as she said, or this problem that we need to fix. Does that chime with your experience in Brent?
Oh, totally. It made me smile, Jill, only because I did test your CAP assessment. Brent was one of the councils which tested the assessment. But talking about RPA, when we wanted to introduce RPA in Brent, we did a show and tell to the workforce, and we showed them that, you're taking 3 months to manually complete a process, and a bot could do it within a week. And they all thought that it would give better quality data. And it took a while to make people understand, if you don't re-engineer the process, you don't address bad quality data that's already there in the legacy systems, all a bot is doing is just speeding that process of that bad process. Instead of 3 months, you're getting the bad output much earlier on. That's, and it's a very common theme that happens in local government. But I really, it resonates what you're telling, Jill, around, you've got to turn this on your head. 10, 15 years ago, even in local government, technology was seen as a piece of kit. You bring it in, and all of a sudden you think your problems are solved. You're saving money, your service delivery is excellent, residents are very happy. Actually, they're not. It's people who make the difference. It's not the actual kit itself. And I just think if you focus on the outcome and don't get so hung up about the technology, I think you'll reach a better place much quicker. it's better value for money as well.
That almost sounds to me like an example of failing faster, though, as you said, which is what Silicon Valley is always telling us to do, right? So that's, and they say government can't compete with Silicon Valley innovation. A key part of this, Jason, is obviously culture, and I think that's something we've talked about quite a bit today, is putting the right culture in place to support innovation, all the while having these kind of, problems like legacy tech in the background. From your role and the role of your department in government, what can be done to help kind of inculcate that culture at a national level to enable, public bodies to embrace new technology and innovation?
Wow, that's a big question. Well, I think what I would say is culture is partly about the how. And for me, yes, outcomes really matter. But if you build a bad set of technology, you get locked into a private vendor who won't let you get your data out, then you're going to have a problem. And culture is partly about that, asking the right questions, understanding why we care about open data standards, why we care about coding in the open, why we have the service standard and the tech code of practice, because we're trying to build lasting assets that are going to be serving generation to generation to improve the public good. So I think part of the role for my DDAT function is leading by example, doing things in the right way, and that's a core value for us. Kindness and collaboration are really important. So we want to do great work, but if we're not doing it the right way, we feel that we've failed. I think the difficulty, having been in local government and in central government, is capacity. And it is harder to sort of stay true to some of those values when you're in a local public agency like a council or a police force, where you just don't have as many people or as big a budget to try and stay true to those things. And sometimes you just got to take the suboptimal outcome because that's the best you can do, and that can be hard when stakeholders are reading Wired magazine or something and you think like, AI is going to come down and solve all their problems. So I think that's managing upwards can be really tricky.
For all the challenges, there are clearly examples of how technology is being solved, used to help solve problems or at least address them. Giles, you kind of touched on that in your introduction, the work that you've been involved with in using tech and data to help tackle violence against women and girls. Could you tell us a bit more about what that looks like and how tech is being used in this way and how we can kind of see the impact of that?
Yeah, no, sure. Again, a big question. I'll try and take a couple of examples. So just from the reporting process, traditionally, policing's been a very kind of analog reporting service, and that poses a number of barriers. So there's the obvious barrier in terms of calling the police to perhaps give information at a time of extreme emotional and often physical trauma and danger means that often information doesn't get given in a very coherent or accessible way. That leads to a lot of issues with the way in which information is recorded, the way in which information is linked together. So whether police are attending an incident and recognising that this incident might be part of a pattern of behaviour, for example, and so and also perhaps the issues to do with the victim or the survivor who's experiencing that incident, with not necessarily having any control as to what happens next. If police officers suddenly turn up at your address, almost by definition, you don't have control of the situation. You don't know what's happening. So that leads to lots of issues to do with the fact that complaints that are made initially don't necessarily get followed through properly. It means that people don't necessarily give their continued consent for an investigation to continue and provide a statement that might then go into the criminal justice system. And so there are ways in which to victims and survivors directly or through third parties, whether that's through support organisations or indeed through advocates like independent domestic abuse advocates or sexual violence advocates, can help give much more control and agency to survivors, so that they're able to give a much fuller and better account of what's actually happened to them than they would in the heat of the moment, where perhaps they've got police officers in their front room. Of course, none of that negates from the fact that the police are an emergency service. There'll always be an expectation that the police will turn up if something bad is happening. But that of itself isn't necessarily the best time to capture all the information that can really help resolve the situation. So it's complementing those traditional issues with providing new tools and new resources that can support police to do more in this field. And I'd like to just highlight the work that's going on around a program called Operation Soteria. Some people may have heard about this, which is to do with the investigation and prosecution of rape and sexual offences. Again, it's very widely publicised, the very low conviction rates there are for rape and sexual offences that have really declined in recent years and are in the low single figures of complaints. And there's multiple reasons for that, to do with the whole end-to-end process of the criminal justice system. So it's not just a policing issue, it's a Crown Prosecution Service issue, it's a courts issue as well. But one of the things that underpins all of that is about having a joined-up view of the process and a joined-up view of the outcome. And so one of the things that Soteria, which is an evidence-based approach to breaking down all those stages of the investigation and the victim's journey, is to try and establish some core principles around making sure that each investigation is victim-centred, it's suspect-focused, so it's the suspect who's being investigated, not the victim, and it's context-led, which means understanding how has this offending happened, in what context has this offending happened, recognising that often, very, very often, this is not an isolated incident, this will be part of a pattern of behaviour. And so all of those things mean that the importance of linking pieces of data that might sit in different bits of the system, they might sit in different bits of a police system, and police, like lots of other public services, has got lots of legacy IT systems, so the criminal justice system might not be very well linked up with the public protection system or the child protection system. There might be other agencies that got relevant data, and making sure that information is searchable, accessible, linkable, and can then be brought to bear. And all of that requires a much more joined-up approach, not just across police forces and with other agencies, but also with providers, making sure that providers really understand the aim of the process they're trying to support, and making sure they can be involved in co-designing solutions that really meet that, rather than historically policing tended to be very bad at giving requirements out to suppliers.
Everyone is bad.
Everybody's very bad at it, yes. And so there's a lot of guesswork often involved in we think this solution will work for you, rather than actually kind of working it through and prototyping it within real context. Sorry, I could go on and on about this, but
you're passionate.
Absolutely.
You talked about being victim-centred, and I guess in the policing context, that is the extension of being citizen-centric, which is, I think, something you mentioned in your opening remarks, Rihanna. I'd be curious to know, for Brent, what does being citizen-centric look like in the context of your job, in whether it's how you design services, how you design policy? What does it look like in practice to focus on citizens?
I think in practice, it's just about having that engagement and collaboration. Buzzwords, I'm sure anybody who's written a strategy here would have used it. But for me, Sam, it's about coming up with creative initiatives that get residents involved in what we are trying to do. A good example would be when Brent introduced a My Account portal because we wanted to self-service. We made a decision that most of our services, it's online by design, you have to, it's digital by design, so we will provide online, and you would have to go on the My Account portal. You'll be able to interact and engage with us in a secure manner from anywhere, any place, 24/7. We did all of that. But before we launched it, we actually did a beta testing with 200 residents. It took a bit of, please be involved. This is an opportunity for you to tell us, going back to the requirements, about what would really help you. Should we make it very difficult and secure by having a multi-factor authentication? Or would you like to get into your My Account through Facebook, through one of the social media platforms? Just kind of asking them the questions. But interestingly, when we were speaking to our residents, it turns out that they raised some very valid questions. Like, we had an elderly gentleman who said, but how would my son deal with this? Because he's got substance abuse and there's a risk of him becoming homeless. And you're saying that he would have to apply this online. And that made us think that we then need to start working with the partners, getting them involved in the code design. So it's not just, when we speak about being citizen-centric, it's about all the peripherals, everybody around it, and everybody contributes. But then getting requirements from everybody also is difficult. So you've got to kind of maintain the balance about, where you could probably draw the line and make sure that you can maintain a really good balance. But I'll go back about citizen-centric is also not just asking them, but also giving them the responsibility that they have a role to play in this. So during COVID, one of the biggest hits for us was that we have 15,000 businesses that operate within Brent. And obviously, a lot of it was retail. So our high streets were completely gone. That really hit on the economy. So we developed a Springboard, which is an online training platform with one of our technology partners for our residents, where they could get online training all the way from how do I do a really good email to being a Python coder. And it's free. We had 50,000 residents who went through that so that they can upskill themselves. But then we do have an employment department. Our job is to also provide them with the enablers and motivate them enough so that they can do the job themselves, rather than us having to find the solutions all the time. And another example is where we've set up this Take Your Shot studios. Initially, I wasn't very keen on the name. It felt like a COVID jab, like Take Your Shot. But basically, this is a platform which is run by two of our Brent residents for women and for young people from really underprivileged background who probably don't have the means but have a really good idea to create a digital product. So this is a free space for them to come, to try, connect, network with like-minded people, and make their dream a reality. The catch is they get a free space, but if your business then goes up and running, you got to employ a Brent resident. So it is open for Brent residents. So we are really trying to create that ecosystem again, that the community plays a part in creating all of that. And you've got to give them that space and the seat on the table to be able to do that. I think that's one way of making sure that your services are modeled around your residents and what their needs are.
Jill, obviously the kind of work Rahan is talking about is local in its nature and is taking place on the ground locally by really innovative organisations like Brent, clearly. What do you see as the most meaningful way in which central government, through, I guess largely through your department, but through other bits of central government as well, how can they best support, local public services to deliver kind of, impact-focused innovation?
I think that's a really interesting point, because I think, as articulated, the last thing in the world that you want is the centre interfering because it doesn't know best. And that's probably the starting point. And again, very much the ethic of the department that I work for is about that devolution and making sure that it's in the local area. But there are some things, and we know this because we've been doing quite a lot of research as part of our Future Councils activity, that it helps if the centre intervenes on. So for instance, things like we hear feedback about risk. And when I say risk, that's a very all-encompassing thing. That's risk from a cyber perspective. That's risk from, we maybe don't want to share data and information, because if we share that information, then with this kind of like between our different systems, then ooh, people might look at us, or there might be a problem with that. So we don't want to take on that risk. We want an umbrella behind it. And then there's the other factor, which is, I think, around cost. And we shouldn't kind of like, that's probably the main one, because there's so many legacy platforms and issues and technical lock-ins and things like that, that they inhibit a lot of the ideas that you've just been articulated in Brent, because you're paralysed from the start. You can't even break into it because you're just dealing with so many legacy issues. So what we bring from the centre is to isolate and to help to like unpack and unpick some of those things, to help to take on some of the risk. So if there is a sense of we're uncertain, we don't feel like we can do this, then that's where the centre can help to intervene in order to kind of say, data sharing, you're fine, you're covered, this is what you need to do, those type of things. Similarly, to break down that kind of that sense of I'm locked in from a particular technology sector. So it's like, what can we do to make things free, to make things open? Back to kind of some of the points that Jason was saying about, you know, because we operate completely in the open, and how do we share that across the different kind of like local authorities, so that those big technology partners who have effectively created that lock-in culture, we're able to displace them and move them out of the way. And that's, I think, for me, that's where the centre is driving for good. And then the other part I think that we then need to do is that, like, how do we support in that middle layer about all the great initiatives that you're talking about? But that's Brent. Can we take that and can we propagate that out to other areas in order to, so that everybody gets the value? And I think they're probably the two main themes that we play in.
You spoke at the start of your answer about the importance of kind of not getting in the way, I guess, which brings me to the kind of, I guess, the other part of government or public sector ministers or elected members, cabinet members, whatever branch of the public sector you're in. There's usually, or quite often, someone elected to their office. Jason, if I can come to you on this, if you don't mind, and apologies, you may not thank me for this. I know that you mentioned you've worked in local government and central government. I know you've also sat on a local council and indeed been a local council leader. So I'd be curious to get your thoughts on the importance of that relationship. What is the most useful way in which elected members or ministers, without being remotely political about it, but what are some of the key ways in which they can support the work of officials, and how important and maybe even challenging is that relationship in delivering transformation?
I mean, it's a really important relationship, right? And I think, you know, whether it's a board in a private sector company, council, cabinet member, or a minister in government, when it works well, it's mutually beneficial for all involved. So I think, you know, jokes aside, it's a really important relationship to get working right. If we're here at techUK, so let's make it about technology. Most elected officials are not going to be technological experts. They will hear stuff, they will have suppliers and public affairs people tell them things, and what they need is good advice and not people who just go yes to everything. They need that critical eye and support. And I think one of the challenges is as an official, you don't want to be saying no to everything, but you need to be realistic about the art of the possible, particularly within the resource envelopes we operate in. But if you can get to a place of sort of openness and trust, it's much more impactful, I think, for all involved. I certainly was, as a council leader, the annoying person coming up with new ideas, going, why don't we do this? So I definitely have been there. But, you know, I think naturally, politicians are operating on a shorter time scale because they need to deliver stuff to show why people voted for them and why it was different. And that can be helpful when the inertia of large organisations is to play a long game, to see how things are going to play out, and to, you know, manage your scarce budgets accordingly in a wider resource battle, right? So it can be a useful way of unblocking some things to get some energy from them. And I think when you and your elected sponsor can align on something, you can really motor on something, and that can be really powerful. But you can only pick one or two things to do that. If you try and do everything, it just doesn't happen. And I think, you know, over time we've seen people like Francis Morden, Martha Lane Fox, and people like, get GDS going. That was really powerful. And we've seen, long-standing relationships between council leaders and chief executives in Manchester that led to Greater Manchester. You can see it work. And so it's a side of party politics. You go, that's an effective working relationship. And I think that's what we all sort of need to aspire to. I think long-term game, though, is we need to look at how we can up the skill level and awareness and understanding of technology, digital and data in senior leaders, whether elected or not, because it's so fundamental to how organisations can succeed in the modern day. How can it not be part of their knowledge and skill set? So how can we shift that learning agenda? I know in the civil service there's an objective that all senior civil servants do some DDAT training by the end of next year. I hope that happens. It would be great, but that means every deputy director and above doing a couple of hours at least. It's a start, but we need to keep working on that.
Yeah, I can't help but think of that saying, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing.
No comment.
Yeah. I'm going to open it up to the floor in just a moment, just to give you a little bit of warning to have a think about what you might want to ask our panel. Giles, if I can just come back to you, though, to just hear a little bit more, I guess, about what you were talking about earlier in the work you've already been involved in. Are there other areas of policing or law enforcement that you feel are also kind of ripe for the kind of initiatives that you've worked on before or could really benefit from some of the approaches you talked about?
So I think just building on the point that Jason was making, which is the fact that leaders, whether those are political leaders or operational leaders in the form of senior police officers or partner organisations, sometimes they've got a bit of knowledge and understanding from one context, and can you apply it to another? In the policing sense, what's been really striking around this work around violence against women and girls is that actually a lot of it is remembering what you already know, because some of the tools and applications that can be used to target particularly prolific and very dangerous perpetrators are things that are already out there. They're things that have been used for a number of years. Perhaps they've been focused at counter-terrorism, or they've been focused at serious organised crime. But these are things that policing as an organisation, as a sector, is very familiar with. But it's just not necessarily been thinking about can and should we be applying these same tools and methodologies into this area. And I think there's a good example from which has had quite a lot of attention, the work that the Met Police has committed to doing around its top 100 perpetrators. Obviously, the Met's issues around this whole area are very widely publicised, and the Commissioner, Mark Rowley, has been very public focus in saying how the Met will track and attempt to bring to justice these most dangerous perpetrators. And I think that's that's laudable, because this is an area which has not had enough of a proactive response from policing historically. Of course, with that, there are a set of risks and issues that come with it around what's the data being used to compile those profiles. Is that data adequate? Is it biased? Is it just police data? We know police data has issues of data quality, but also the police traditionally are not interested in everybody in society, they're interested in a subset. So is it complete enough to actually build that picture? So there's lots of issues there, but there's also lots of potential to be better, I think, in terms of, and I think there is now growing awareness within policing as a sector that data is so fundamental to decision making. It's so fundamental to the management of risk and the management of public protection that it's got to be treated as more of a strategic asset than has been the case in the past. And that means that increasingly that growth of data professionals within policing, I think, is mirroring some of the developments you see within the wider public sector, that this is now seen as a proper, serious career path, and something that people have really got to invest in.
Great, thank you. As I said, it will be good to see if we have any questions from our audience now. Do we have anyone who wants to get involved? Yeah, Gentleman there.
Hi everybody, thanks for that discussion, it's fascinating. I've got a strong interest in local public services. I'm really interested to hear some of the conversation around how you foster collaboration and the dissemination of digital skills and best practice across the country, and what role you see technology could play in that.
Jill, do you mind if I come to you on that one?
So we do a lot of dedicated engagement. So we work with a lot of local authorities. We have a whole training program in place that we run in order to build both agile skills, digital capability and competency. We are also looking at, and it's kind of picking up on Jason's point, because many times what you actually get is you get the ambition and the drive in the core members, and then it gets squashed because at a more senior level, that level of knowledge, comprehension and understanding is not there. So we're also on that pathway of, we can't just kind of work with the teams, we also need to work with the more senior stakeholders as well for them to buy into the concept. And then the other bit that we do is we bring in both ourselves, so members of my team will work in conjunction with the kind of like the local authorities and the councils, as well as we bring in third parties as well who've also got specialist skills. The end game now is to very much make it, we don't want to create a dependence. So we want to create something that is self-sustaining, so it is enduring and it can continue. It's not dependent on us, that type of thing. So we do a lot on engagement to kind of like make that happen.
I think just to add to Jill's point, there are actually quite a few platforms, Brent, for example, we work with London Office of Technology and Innovation. We've got loads of other councils there, and we all meet to share best practice. Most importantly, share what we didn't do really well. So you can learn from my mistakes rather than make your own. So you can go away and make your new ones. But we share all kinds of frameworks. If we've introduced a governance and if that worked, we use the apprenticeship levy to upskill our workforce. I think technology definitely plays a part because, I'm not a big fan of COVID, I'm sure nobody is, but the fact that we have to do all kinds of trainings now via Teams and do it by online means rather than have a classroom kind of a training. So I think technology does play a part in how we share all of this. But I think slowly the culture is changing within local government, where every single local authority probably felt, this is us, we'll work in silo, we're special, we know what to do, we've got our own problems. Now it's very much around, hey, I'm trying to do this. Is anybody out there? Do you want to come and co-design with this, with us? Because then if we do develop a product, there is an issue about sustainability. There's an issue about maintenance and support. And all of this costs a lot of money. So when you join forces, you get that economies of scale. So I think we are growing up a bit. We are a bit more wiser. So we do believe in that collaboration.
Jason, did you want to?
Yeah, no, I think collaboration is absolutely key. I think Lottie, London Office of Technology and Innovation, is like a real sort of shining light in that. It's been hard yards. Every council's special, right? They're very proud of their place. That's the point of a council. But actually, you don't need 365 different, payments received systems and, those kinds of things. So we're on a journey. But I in a previous role, set up a shared unit for data analytics between police, fire, local authority, health. And it was brilliant, and all the people were excited, and they were told to work on the top issue for the area, which was county lines. The idea that bad people come from the town and sell drugs in their leafy areas, right? And it was on the front page of the weekly local rag and all of that stuff. And they did this huge analysis and basically found the biggest problem, the highest reported crime in the area was actually domestic violence. And so they were like really proud of this work. So they went to present it to the chief of police, chief fire officer, blah, blah, blah. The response, you're wrong. That can't be right. We're sure county lines is the biggest problem. the reason was that they hadn't been taken on that journey. They had just been hearing from elected members and the media that this was the #1 problem. So going overnight from this to that, they just couldn't get it. And I think you do need to think about when you're doing any kind of thing, but particularly when it's collaborative, people aren't used to working together. You can't just land a big bang on them. You kind of really got to take them through it. So all the data team were really like shocked and post-faced, like how can they not believe the data? The data is the truth type thing. And they did some storytelling courses and went back and did some work on actually taking the people on the journey, and they kind of bought into it. And that's always stuck in my mind of it, you know, you just can't add the tech or add the new capability. There's a whole piece of stakeholder work to do to make it stick and land. So yeah, but collaboration is just so important on this stuff. And I do feel there's less competitiveness than there used to be in the sector, which I think is really helping. There's a little bit still, but
Oh, of course, Brent is special.
yeah. See, but it is much more open and sharing, and that's really positive.
We might have time for another question or two. Do we have? Yes, Heather. Do we have a mic on the way? Thank you.
Thanks. I guess I wanted to ask, really focused on what we talked about in the beginning about being very outcome focused, yet there's a big sort of political push around a particular technology now, and I wonder how helpful that is. How helpful it is to have such political talk and discussion around, well, let's just say it, AI, and whether or not you're finding that to be helpful to you sort of addressing, being outcome driven, or whether it's a bit of a hindrance.
It's a big question. And I mean, yeah, if it's not AI, it would have been something else before that.
Yeah.
I'm quite sure.
Can I take that?
Please do.
I'm dying to speak about it. For the record, I said I'll marry ChatGPT. But honestly, it's a really good question. It's not about if it's a political push or not. I just think from a local government perspective, artificial intelligence is here. We like it or not, it's here. It's part of our life. Actually, it's been there for the last 10 years. It's not nothing new. Our workforce is using it in their personal life. Our residents are using this in their personal life. I think the problem happens in local government is when a new technology comes and people are talking about it, there's a lack of awareness. The biggest issue is how do you deploy technology within an organization? You understand the high-level concept what artificial intelligence can do, but how do you get a service manager sitting in a social care department to understand how they can use AI to make their service delivery better? And if they do something wrong, because AI could result in cyber breaches and, everybody's making a bomb with AI, will I get into trouble? It is about coming up with practical governance and framework and parameters that a normal workforce, a normal officer in a department can feel comfortable and confident that, yes, I can do this, I can try this, I can see how it will work. That's one element of it. The other element of using AI is, as I said, the awareness around what are the risks attached, how do we mitigate it, what are the steps we can take so that we can kind of really understand how we go about doing this. In Brent, again, we set up a data ethics board. So when I have somebody in a data team tell me, I would like to build a dashboard, I'm planning to use predictive modeling, or I'm planning to do something in generative AI, do it confidently. You don't have to worry because we've got an ethics board, so we can wash through your use case there, so you're not going to get sacked because you've done something wrong. You've got to build that confidence and the trust. And by doing that, you can convince the seniors and the members who don't know much about it. They're not the experts, as you said, Jason, they're not the experts. So all they know is what they've read in the paper. No one's talking about ChatGPT finding out a new antibiotic or the fact that it can look at some 30,000 or 7,000 pictures of a tumor and say it's cancerous or not. Can you imagine an individual waiting for 6 months to know if they're going to get cancer or not, but ChatGPT can do that within a week? There's a lot of good and there's a lot of bad, but I think it is around coming up with the right governance, the framework, creating that awareness, building that skill sets, So that's an interesting point around skill sets. I do go off a tangent, so do this and I will stop. Talking about skill sets, I was speaking to someone and I was mentioning it to the panel that there's a job role called as AI prompter. How cool is that? But imagine me going to my HR and saying, I need a job description for it. It's an evolving thing, and we are not very clear about how to deploy it, how to use it. And I think once we get that clarity, and I would go back to Jill's point around, that's what the center needs to do for local government and local authorities and the smaller organizations, help us navigate, how to deploy it. We get the concept, and technology is here. Nothing can be done about it, but help us navigate to deploy and implement it in a user-friendly way with a bit of confidence and trust that it's secure and we know how to use it and develop that skills.
No, absolutely. Can I just come in there?
Please do.
I really strongly support what Rahana said about kind of taking some of the highfalutin kind of rhetoric around technology and making it real. Having lived through policing trying to ignore the internet for kind of 15 years. And then it moved from ignoring it to, well, we'll just set up a squad and that will deal with the internet. We'll call it a cybercrime team. And then suddenly realizing that every crime has an online component, now domestic abuse is happening online as well as offline. So you can't just put these things in a box and pretend they're special. They are part of life, and that's the way in which society is evolving. And we've got to kind of recognise that, and we've got to equip people. It doesn't mean that every cop has got to suddenly become kind of a cyber AI expert, but it does mean that you've got to build those skills within the workforce. You've got to recognise that's an enduring requirement. It's not something that sending 5 cops on a training course is going to sort out for the next sort of 10 years. So it's about having a pipeline, and also perhaps thinking about diversity, thinking about where are you getting your recruits from? Are you going to the right places? All those kind of issues. And I know those are things that happen in all other bits of the public sector and government as well. But really, it's only really been in the last 5 years that people in policing have started waking up to the fact that actually this isn't going away, this stuff. We've really got to get on the programme and recognise that this is here to stay, and we've got to change perhaps some of the ways we operate as a result.
Great, thank you. I think, unfortunately, that is just about all we have time for this panel. In just a moment, I think Julian from techUK is going to come up and kind of close out the day for us. But I just want to say a massive thanks to Jill, Rahana, Giles and Jason. It's been an absolute pleasure being in your company. Thank you so much. And if you'll join me in thanking our panelists. And Julian, if you want to come up and see us out for the day. Thank you.